Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to FoundFlix. On this Ending Explained, we're looking at things heard and seen, where an artist relocates to the country and begins to suspect her marriage has a sinister darkness, one that rivals her new home's history. Well, we've got the latest craptacular Netflix hit on our hands here. My whole thing with their originals is that usually means they're not very good. Pretty consistently, that is the case. Netflix is much more interested in pumping out new content regularly than, quality. That is a rare trait. This one isn't all bad to be fair, but it is quite boring for the most part, which is reflected even in its generic title, Things Heard and Seen. I'm like, I don't know what you're giving me here. A more appropriate one might be Don't Marry a Douchebag, because that much more accurately describes the story. Anyway, much of the runtime is dominated by musty family drama, watching our lead's marriage slowly crumble apart. And the supernatural aspect really feels more like the B plot line, kind of more in the background compared to all that other stuff. And I figured the ending would follow suit with something quite obvious, but nope! The ending was completely bananas, and I actually did respect it for going as far as it did, because I honestly did not see that coming. There's also a lot of little details to the story that help us to make sense of everything as well as the ending, so there is actually a ton of stuff to cover with this one. So let's dig into things seen and heard, breaking down the story, just what the ghosts are all about, and what the heck is going on with the bonkers ending. We open with a quote, always a promising start. "This I can declare, things that are in heaven are more real than things in this world," says some schmobert. Really, this guy Swedenborg is a mystic philosopher, and his whole ideas are kind of the backbone of our entire story, as we will come to see. A car approaches in the distance and pulls up to a farmhouse, informing us this is the winter of 1980. A man, George, comes to a stop and takes a moment of deep consideration. He's confused by a splatter of blood on the windshield and peers up to the ceiling as more drops down on his face. He rushes inside, his daughter Franny on the couch looking off. He carries her out into a field, rushing to somewhere, as we jump back to the previous spring at Franny's birthday party. Everyone applauds as she blows out the candles, but she uses more than one breath, which means your wish isn't coming true, you fool! A friend hands a busy Catherine some cake, saying the other ladies have been noticing she's looking thin lately, and is right into the restroom, forcing herself to throw up. Things are looking up, it appears, for the young family, as George is officially a doctor now, and has already secured a gig at a small rural college upstate. Ooh, he must be good! Her friend raises concerns over this big change, her being a city girl and all, but for her it's all about George's well-being. He hates the bustle, and she learned after years of marriage he's been getting financial help from his folks, who recently cut him off. Poor baby's gotta grow up, huh? Clearly feeling bad for him, she concludes that he has made sacrifices for her, so she's obligated to give it a shot. Busy at work refinishing a mural, George busts in, informing her that he's found the perfect house. Well, geez, George, thanks for involving me in that process, and are off to make a hopefully fresh start out in the country. In bed, she inquires if he's nervous about tomorrow, and he's not whatsoever. Should I be? She tells him that, first stage jitters are pretty normal, and has an idea of how to help him de-stress. Wink, wink, starting to get down to business. In little Franny's room, there's a bunch of creepy dolls around, and one clown light starts blinking annoyingly. Kat stops in the middle of their makeout session, oddly smelling car exhaust fumes. He jokes, "What do you think, Ghost use premium?" Oh, George, you are cut up. Franny hears screeching, and the chair creaks on its own. She screams, running in scared, wanting to sleep with them to George's frustration. At the school, he meets Floyd, his new boss, who brings up a particular passage from his dissertation that he liked the most. Although George says that he struggled the most with that part, the idea of some mystic being able to trick a modern person. Floyd defends that it's not just some mystic, and that everything in the natural world has a counterpart in the spiritual one. George himself isn't a believer, deriding the writer Swedenborg's claims of communicating with ghosts and stuff. But Floyd is much more open, even a fan of the so-called mystic, and invites him to a seance. Floyd has a welcoming gift for him, a book entitled Heaven and the World of Spirits and Hell. Kat obsessively steps on the scale, startled by her toothbrush vibrating to life, and falls on it, breaking the glass. There's a knock on the door from the neighbor boys, Cole and Eddie, offering their housekeeping services. Best of all, they come cheap, and Cole is a great babysitter, already making a quick connection with little Fran. Noticing her picking at the salad, he scoffs, "Oh, you're back to salads now?" She excuses that she had a big lunch. "But what about the shakes? You skipped your morning one." Later, George plays with Franny while she downs the shake, watching them have a great time just standing there in the corner alone. While finishing up the dishes, she discovers an old Bible nestled in the cabinets. Inside, there's family records including deaths from 1817 onwards to 1877, that last name scratched out, deeming them damn. She hears a ghostly echo, and a kind of wave of energy floats over the glass bottles to a ring lodged in the windowsill. She's able to pry it out with a knife, the emblem appearing to be two women embracing. She pays a visit to the local historical society in search of more information, and learns that there's a picture of her house hanging up, featuring the owners from back in 1882, assumingly the wife here being the one who was damned. Meanwhile, George is doing some research of his own into that of the young co-ed Willis that he spots with an art history book. Their conversation is casual, yet still bears some flirtation. She meets Franny, and the girl asks for help with a word in the book. She reads from it, "He shouldn't be here, should not be about, should not be here while mother is out." Yeah, pretty appropriate there, George. He's obviously already having lusty thoughts. Kat bursting into the house, startled by him beating his meat in the shower. After class, George meets the wife of his tennis buddy, Justine, who wants to have the couple over, as George has already developed a cult-like following at the school and wants to see what all the hubbub is about. She loves the paintings adorning his wall, seeing it was George that painted him, but he's strangely humble for a change, touting his wife as the real artist. In bed, she is again woken by the smell, George grumbling that he figured it out, it's coming from the garage and he's gonna get some fans. She goes to check it out anyway, hearing some distant Mozart playing on the piano that becomes louder. She rushes in, seeing no one is at the keys. Franny catches a glimpse of a woman and screams for mommy. She tells Kat that she saw the lady, and again she lets him sleep with him. George is also upset again, thinking if they just got her sedative prescription that this would all stop. Catherine comes across the book Floyd gave to George and decides to read it herself, starting with one passage. On Earth, all are associated with those in the spiritual world like ourselves, and since united to them, the ghostly voice whispering repeats her words. Clearly, that's what we've got going on here. This spirit is similar in some way to Kat, and the two are connected in that way, as written in the book. Out on a jog, George happens to wind up at the stables where Willis works and decides to have a totally platonic and innocent visit. They share a brief chat and some awkward chuckles about what he's doing here. And even though she dubs him a presumptuous fucker, guides him back to a room and they clearly get down. At home, on the phone, Kat complains of feeling lonely to her mom and quickly hangs up when George returns, pointing out, "Quite a jog, huh?" He stammers, "Yeah, I don't know what came over me," handing her some flowers, and he rushes off to get ready for class. She grabs the ring and places it on her finger, tossing the flowers in the bin. Then Eddie finally gets to meet his new boss. He asks him to not reveal what happened at the house, worried about how Kat would react. He agrees, as he and his brother are only here for honest work. George still finds it odd that they want to be here at all, him replying that taking care of this house is like second nature to us. Obviously, some kind of horrific event went down in the house, hence the ghosts and everything, which was also tied to Eddie and his family that must have used to live here. George comes home later to Eddie tinkling at the piano and Kat drinking. He's clearly perturbed, laughing it off as what a surprise. Uncomfortable, Eddie gets up to leave, but he insists he stay and finish playing. Kat scoffs, "The man of the house has spoken, finish the damn song," and gulps down the rest of her wine. Fanny is awoken by her dang clown blinking, hearing whispers. The lady is back, smiling at her, which was actually a little creepy, but it's not like she's trying to harm or scare her, you know? Gotta be something else going on here. George has another hookup with Willis and starts getting weird, wanting to get to know her better. She remains closed off, questioning what is wrong with her. She's been around guys like him her whole life. Her dad, a lawyer, made a fortune off shitheads like him. Just the way it works out for men, she groans. It's dinner time with Justine and Bram, calling themselves merely tenants of their home, as places like this will outlive them all. We learn Bram moved out here to work on a novel, but really spends most of his time getting high. Meanwhile, Justine shows off her weaving studio, describing the process as being a spiritual and cosmic one, even in a way feeling guilty for taking credit. Wow, yeah, weaving, the work of the cosmos, sure, whatever you say, lady. I use the power of the cosmos to sew a little blanket for you. Kat wants her to make her something, and as George already asked her to make a scarf, she can just add it to their order. Discussing kids, Justine says that they were conflicted, but Mother Nature eventually made the choice for them. Kat admits to feeling conflicted too, pretty much throughout her entire relationship with George. I wonder why. From her getting pregnant, then married, and everything else, feeling the last few years were a blur. On the drive back, George laments Bram's easy life. Must be nice to inherit a fortune and spend all your day not riding your butt. She questions his ability to drive after smoking some reefer, and he's just like, yeah, I'm totally okay. But to mess with her, I guess, he randomly speeds up, barreling down the road. He comes to a sudden stop, laughing he was just trying to have some fun. Remember that? But she's understandably annoyed, batting him away. And things only escalate, him blaming her behavior on the alcohol, especially on an empty stomach. She yowls she's sick of everyone blaming everything on that. He grabs her and she fights back with nails to the face, and he throws her away, sending her hard into the ground. around. A line has definitely been crossed. He does at least give a half-hearted attempt at making amends, promising that he would never hurt her, and admits that he has not been sensitive to her needs. Oh, you think so, George? Yeah. It seems that the spirits feel that this reconciliation is a bad idea and intervene via the clown light. It blinks just as he says, voice breaking, "The one thing I do know is I love you," and the light explodes, really as though the spirit is trying to indicate something is inherently bad about George. The wedge in the couple only grows deeper, Kat beginning to get a life of her own, going to an independent women's art group thing, and in a reversal to before, she comes home to a displaced and hungry George. But she already ate with Justine, fleeing upstairs, leaving poor, useless George all on his own. Outside, Justine is still there, giving him an untrustworthy glance before pulling away. He goes boating with Floyd, learning the tragic story of his cousin Henry. The two used to go sailing all the time, and he actually drowned while sailing the boat. But hey, at least George got to inherit it, the lost horizon. In an attempt to connect with him after his death, he stole his diary, learning that he was gay and unhappy. A typical tortured artist, he says. But then it all vanishes forever, muttering it's also inconsequential. Floyd and his favorite guy ever, Swedenborg, disagree. Death is only the beginning, prodding if he's read that book he gave him. George promises that it's atop of my list. Oh sure, bud. To Floyd's surprise, when coming back to George's place, Kat is there reading it herself. Floyd even more convinced now that there are no coincidences. He explains to her the cover is to represent the transition of a soul into the afterlife, believing death is parallel to birth, but, dying instead. The two connect further when taking him upstairs on a tour. The ghostly energy manifests, and he sees it himself quite clearly. Floyd knowing just as suspected that it wants her in particular. Based on the clues she has so far, she believes it's the wife of Jacob Smith, and he offers to do some research on his own. She's pleased, but urges him to not tell George. Once he leaves, even George is impressed by their connection. "He adored you," he beams. He asked if he said anything. Well, about what? About me, of course. God, what a self-centered jackass. She does feed into his ego, him feeling emboldened. Since having company went over so well, they should have the whole department over. She wants to invite the locals and neighbors too, and he literally laughs at the idea, but he still ultimately caves to her wishes. The party in full swing. Mayor the realtor inadvertently spills the beans on the house's sordid history, calling her a saint for having the boys back. She's like, "What?" And Mayor stammers, "Oh, you know the whole story, right?" "What story?" She tries to leave, but she demands that she tell her everything. She was friends with Ella, the boy's mom, and her husband, as she remembers, was a cruel man in ways you can't imagine. The way she heard it, Calvin slipped Ella and the boys a sedative, and when they were out cold, he went out and shot every single cow that they owned. After this, he went to the garage and asphyxiated himself with car exhaust fumes, hence the smell earlier. Ella supposedly never woke up in the morning, Kat understanding now that she was mistaken about which spirit she was seeing, actually being Ella the entire time, not Smith's wife. Outside sharing a joint, Justine and George have a kind of tete-a-tete, him accusing her of putting ideas in Kat's head, while she raises suspicions of how much his students worship him. She says that she's just being honest, believing that the truth will set you free. He disagrees. No one wants the truth or to be set free. Says who, she fires back. The Eagles! Well, if you're living your life based on Eagles lyrics, I cannot help you there. In a play of power, he asks to see her wrist and starts gripping tighter and tighter. He challenges her to get loose, and he finally lets her go, leaving upset. Well, that was weird. Seems like George is slowly going further off the deep end here. He enters to Kat doing the dishes as usual, boasting of the night's success. But she can't hold back that she knows the truth about the house, him excusing that it was just to protect her, wanting her to be happy here. They're interrupted once more by Ella's spirit, the radio lighting up and blaring static. George angrily picks it up and smashes it to bits, which finally silences it. She's had enough of his shit, ordering him and Fran away for a weekend with the grandparents, which he uses as an opportunity to dig deeper into the past. After uncovering the details of Ella, she calls Floyd ready for their seance, wanting to find out why she is reaching out to her. Floyd has some info on his own of the original Smith family. The still nameless wife was a follower of Swedenborg, so it seems that it was actually her that originally opened this door in the house to the other side. Their marriage was unfortunately not a happy one, and she mysteriously died at a young age. Got kind of a pattern of wife murdering going on here in this house, huh? Kat bemoans the amount of death that has happened, but they believe differently, embracing inhabited houses as a blessing. These spirits could be like guardian angels shepherding us to the other side, and perhaps in the afterlife, we actually reach a greater spiritual level. She's confused by the rosy outlook of ghosts. Aren't there bad ones too? They insist that they're never evil. Evil only comes in where welcome, but Good always triumphs. It's time to start calling out to the spirits. The lights flash, and the candles blow out one by one. The fabric on the table is lifted in the air, blowing around the room. They hear the ghostly voices of what sounds like Ella and Calvin, and according to Floyd, she wants to break through, but something is stopping her. Probably Calvin, and the room returns to normal, the cloth flittering lifeless to the ground. Elsewhere, George escorts a group of students on a field trip and is joined by a surprise guest, Justine. Turns out that Floyd wanted an additional chaperone, but I bet she's trying to fish for more about what's under the guise of his personality. She's given more alarming evidence of her husband's extracurricular activities at the library, as Willis has a book checked out under her name. Daddy's friend, Fran chimes in, and she's like, that scumbag, and it's right to the bank to open her own separate account. Meanwhile, more holes start being poked in George's facade. At an art museum, he runs into an old colleague, Dr. Warden. After excitedly giving some info to two co-ed students, Warden immediately rips on him, wishing that he had that same level of passion in his dissertation. But wait, wasn't his dissertation so good that it won him the job? Something not adding up, Georgie boy. He interrogates further. How did you even get the job without a recommendation? And the house of cards tumbles. He's just a temporary instructor that stepped in to help, pointing out it's interesting because they were all calling you professor. He gives a lame excuse of him being tired of correcting them, and Warren is like, all right, loser, later. Justine witnessed the whole thing, asking what's up with that, and he limply laughs, I have no idea. Worried that she's getting close to exposing him, he orders Kat to stay away from her, thinking that she's a lesbian obsessed with her, making problems between them. Kat just rolling her eyes back in disgust. Not much later, the shoe drops, Floyd confronting him that he got a call from his school advisor claiming that he never wrote him a recommendation at all. Yep, he forged it, defending that I wrote the letter that I deserved. He wants to understand why, and George pleads to put it on pause until after the holidays. Around the dinner table, someone who is assumedly George's dad is a dick too. When nephew Henry is brought up, he scoffs that he doesn't know what's worse, the drowning or him being gay. Wow, Apple really doesn't fall far from the tree here, huh? Kat stands up to him that is highly offensive, and his mom agrees, remembering him as a bright and talented young man. She recalls little seaside paintings that he did before his death. He was just about to do a show, and somehow they all disappeared. Geez, George, you stole them too, didn't you? Stealing from your dead cousin and everything to pretend that you're an artist? God, this guy is the worst, seriously. She's figured that out herself, and leaves the table, George finding her at the toilet. Back to that again, he says judgmentally. She shoots back, I happen to be sick, George, throwing up our marriage. The door closing and locking on its own thanks to Ella, hearing that telltale ghostly echo, really trying to protect her from George at this point. At night, we for the first time hear the counterpart male ghost to Ella. He first growls, no one understands us. Seeing George in the car with the engine on, the voice beckoning him to free himself, which certainly must be Ella's husband's spirit that is still lingering around too, and has latched onto George's admittedly fairly evil, or at the very least greasy scumbag nature. As they say, evil welcomes evil. Kat is sobbing on the swing found by Eddie, complaining things aren't great, which I assume must be an outtake repurposed for the movie because, yeah, things ain't great, Seyfried. Eddie relates that he knew guys like George, but entices her that there are others that would worship the ground she walks on. Kat going right in for the seduction, taking control over the young man. Way to go, Kat, I guess. Well, it's only fair. He cheated first, and it's not like the marriage is salvageable at this point anyway. Meanwhile, George leans further into his darker nature, tracking down Floyd and gets invited along on a boat trip. He wants to tell him the truth about what happened, George grumbling something about misreporting sexual misconduct. Floyd reminds him, regardless, that what he did is still a crime and he can't keep it to himself. Tomorrow he's going to bring this to HR, and they both know the outcome. The boot out the door, Georgie boy. Obviously, he's going to take the opportunity to just toss him off the boat, right? Can't get fired that way. Justine runs into Willis at a diner, noticing her scarf, asking where she got it. She stammers that it was a gift and bails out of there suspiciously. Must have been the one she made. She waits outside George's house, a soaking George breathing heavily, surprised by high beams from her car. They continue their adversarial back and forth, asking if she's stalking him now, but she makes it clear that she just cares about Catherine. Oh, and what happened to that scarf that she made for his mom? Uttering, oh, he didn't care for it and it felt cheap. She serves back, well, that explains whose neck it wound up on. Ooh, gotcha burn. He's growing tired of the games. If you have something to say, just say it. She vows, oh, I will, turning on the car and peeling away. Driving down the road, a pair of lights from another car appears behind her and picks up speed, ramming her off the road. Obviously, George, she was definitely getting too close to his secrets now. Kat stumbles across a naked George, and he basically just blows her off, lying implying that he got sick. Well, I'll sleep down here, she tells him casually. Don't want to catch whatever you have. He starts attempting to reach his own spirit, asking for a sign if you're really here. And right on cue, a bird crashes through Franny's room. He runs in, everyone watching silently as it hops back outside and flies away. George glibly tells her to get her boyfriend to fix it in the morning. She's awoken to news of Justine's crash, while George has some business of his own in town, needing that prescription filled for his daughter's night terrors. The doc thinks that Justine will never come out of the coma, but she knows that Justine is strong and still holds out hope. On the radio, she learns of Floyd's sudden, mysterious disappearance. Another member of the department informs quote-unquote George about it, and he plays it up, breaking down in tears. His death is to his benefit, mentioning they're in need of an interim chair, and your name came up. And he tries to play it cool. I guess I could do that. Considering he was just about to lose his entire career, you know, but he won't get off so easy. In class, each of his slides is all the same picture, the cover of the Heaven and Hell book. Growing panicked, he questions who did this. No one admits to it, and he decides to just fuck it and leaves. At home, Kat smiles, "You're home early," and asks if something is wrong. "Well, you skipped your shake again," him with one at the ready, and says she was just putting Fran to bed. He's disappointed, as he wanted to give her a goodnight kiss, and he defiantly storms up to her room for one anyway. He peels back the covers, seeing that she's fully dressed, as though the pair were just about to make a daring escape from the house. The lights start to flicker, and he aggressively grabs Kat, dragging her down the stairs. She breaks loose, going for the phone, and he rips it off the wall, stomping it to pieces. She brings up all of his laundry list of misdeeds, him accusing her of losing her mind. "No, I've woken up," she cries, and she continues tossing luggage in the trunk, but suddenly isn't feeling well. No doubt thanks to George spiking her shake with some of those meds that he picked up. Her vision starts getting blurry, and she manages to hobble back inside. Clutching to the stair railing, she hears the piano playing. It's Ella calling out to her. "On the path of fate, I can bear the sharpest stones so you don't feel their pain. But another's free will is his alone." She keeps weakly crawling, Ella literally watching over her, saying that she would give her life again, but does not have the power to stop this. Kat finally succumbs to the drugs, Ella whispering as she fades away, "Just as she was there for me, I am here for you." Her husband's voice shouts back, "No, stop it," she screams, devolving into a ghost shouting match. Whispers fill the air as George stalks the halls wielding an axe. The male voice croaks to free yourself. Kat passed out on the bed. "Those who commune with evil will never win," Ella intones. A black shadow passes over a sobbing George, and when looking back, she has changed into Ella, reiterating a kind of loop of murders that has occurred in the house, as well as the connection between Ella and Kat. And he brings the axe down on her over and over, blood splattering everywhere, and he falls to his knees in anguish, driven to murder his wife, thanks to the pesky voice of Calvin. George goes on to business as usual for as long as he can, putting up the sea paintings in his new, much bigger office. He rumbles back home, now back at the scene from the opening, and he tries his biggest fib yet. He calls the sheriff, bringing Franny to the neighbor, exclaiming, "Something's happened!" The cops arrive at the house, George a bundle of nerves. They make their way upstairs to the bedroom, Kat's body still there, asking if that's his axe, lights blinking ominously as he stands in the doorframe. He is promptly arrested, but the cops stupidly believe that it was a robbery gone wrong. As his alibi checks out, he was teaching all day. They do decide to just let him go, and it looks like he might get away with this thing. His parents coddle him, promising they'll hire a big city lawyer and get him off on all charges, tying back to what Willis said about her own dad and scumbag men always getting away with things. So there's little hope in how to proceed with the case. Discussing it with Mayor, they agree George did it, but there is no way to connect the dots, sighing, "Where's the justice for the lady in that house?" And it does come in a surprising and quite bizarre form. Justine, still in her coma, has her mind flooded with dreamy images, and the words of guardian angels, getting a flash of what appears to be Kat and Ella, now as like literal angels. Yup. They tell her it's time, and she suddenly regains consciousness, her eyes shooting open. Thanks to the dream dump, now she knows everything. George has been hiding out at his parents' house, and his mom comes in telling him an old friend left a message. Justine! He grows pale when accepting the sticky note. "I know everything," it threatens. Even now, Calvin's spirit is still with him. "They made this happen. It's their fault," he scowls. "They always try to hold you back. You are envied, unrecognized," telling him to trust in his impulses, concluding his ghostly pep talk with a throaty "go." He continues to eternally attempt to flee from his many problems, huffing it down to the marina. Some guy tries to stop him, warning the boat is in bad shape, but a fishful of cash shuts him up and he's on his way. Seeing the boat is the Lost Horizon, the one that he inherited from poor Henry, who he also stole credit for the artwork. God, this guy is such a dick, seriously. It looks like he will get comeuppance after all. Out in the open waters, we again see angelic Ella and Kat, who whisper, similar to the ghost Prior. The gates of hell are only visible for those about to come into it. He who is evil is also at the punishment of evil. Damned, they chant, and in front of him an orange cloud appears, which must be the aforementioned gates of hell themselves. He futilely attempts to get the boat in reverse. The world of spirits is not between heaven and hell. We stand between the two, the ladies continue, as George is consumed by a fiery inferno in the water. The scene with the upside down cross and what it represents and everything is a recreation of that heaven and hell book cover, a soul's journey into the afterlife. So long, George. Also, importantly, as noted by the cross, this is the opposite of the book. Rather than going to heaven, it is hell. They narrate further on his fate that it's because of you our powers grew from tiny drops into an endless sea, focusing in on the ring and the picture of the original Smith family. The idea being here that it was in fact all three of these wronged women working together that made this happen. Their power kind of compounded by being bonded in that way. As they say, it started as tiny drops in an endless sea, implying they actually brought the gates of hell here for George. Another clue about this is right before Kat is killed, Ella whispers that she will help her as she did before, and this is actually referring to Mrs. Smith. It seems that this is where the whole kind of murder loop cycle thing started. We know that she was a fan of Swedenborg, who isn't, but her husband was strictly of a different ideology, and she ultimately died in mysterious circumstances. Must be that she was killed with an axe just as Ella and Kat were. Anyone who inhabits the house is brought into the spiritual battle of this couple, and every time it is ended in the wife being brutally slain. That is until now, well, she was still slain, but the cycle is broken when the husband filling the role, George, finally gets his in the end. Yeah, sure, Kat still died, but the whole concept Floyd and the others bring up constantly is that death is another kind of birth, and in death we actually become more powerful beings in a way, in between heaven and hell, or as we saw, even literally guardian angels. Again, the ending of this went in a way more bananas direction than I thought, especially after so much of the runtime was dominated by their marriage being driven apart. It just seemed like kind of a down-to-earth thing for the most part, and then really went off the rails with that final outcome there. I do in a weird way actually appreciate the direction it took things, and it did weave a quite detailed story. But you know, that doesn't mean that it was a good one necessarily, because much of this was an unscary, unenthralling experience, and a crazy ending can't quite make up for that. Anyway, that's about par for the course with Netflix originals. What are you gonna do? Again, it's about quantity over quality by a mile. That about wraps it up for this time, but don't forget, before we go, you can send me requests for any movies or TV shows you'd like to see me explain by sending them my way on any of my social media accounts at FoundFlix. What did you guys think of Things Seen and Heard and its ending? Do you have any other lingering questions about what went down? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Thanks for watching FoundFlix. See you next time.